Right, so we actually have some big updates regarding the whole A passenger situation. A lot more information has just came out within the past few days. So this video could potentially be a bit of a longer one, but the main things I wanted to talk about today was a member of Kevin's family has came out to speak about the situation, and he has a very different point of view as to the other members of Kevin's family we've heard from. We also have another former client of Jodi Hildebrandt who has came out to speak about her experience with Jodi, and then we also have some brand new updates, one of which being about Pam Bodster and her involvement here. If you remember, I spoke about Pam in my last video, and she is labelled as the president of Connexions, but we don't really know too much about her. Well, it turns out she was kind of involved with this recent situation. And then we also have some brand new updates on Kevin Franke, and it turns out he's not actually as innocent as his attorney has been trying to make him seem over the past few weeks, and actually, he has recently threatened to sue his own daughter. But before we do get any further, I do just want to give big credit to KUTV. They have been covering this situation a lot since the arrest, and they're coming up with a bunch of new information. They're doing a great job, and that's pretty much where a lot of the information I'm going to speak to you about has actually came from. So yeah, KUTV deserve all the credit here. Okay, so let's start with one of Jodi Hildebrandt's former clients and her experience with Jodi.
I felt like her style was a little bit more maybe aggressive than what I had experienced in the past, which I thought was going to be a really good thing. I then joined her women's group, our weekly group sessions, and so I did that for nearly a year.
What were those sessions like? The group sessions?
Those group sessions were myself and however many other ladies, I would say 10 to 12 regularly.
Yeah, so one thing that stands out to me straight away there is that there was apparently 10 to 12 other women in these classes. Like, clearly Jodi was successful in the sense that she had a lot of people who trusted her, and she had a lot of clients. Which I guess makes sense why she lived in such an expensive house, but she has genuinely been manipulating people for so long, and it has worked, clearly. There's a lot of people that we haven't heard from, we probably won't ever hear from. They might not want to speak about it, obviously, right? But if there was 10 to 12 people at the same time as Brittany in the class, and this was just that one period of time during Jodi's career, we can imagine how many people have actually been affected by Jodi.
I would say with traditional therapy or other therapists I've gone to, there's a little bit more of a feeling of understanding of maybe what a person's been through, whereas this was pretty strict on like no excuses, you're just going to make it happen and it's up to you 100%. I would call it more military style if I had to like give it a name versus something else.
Yeah, this isn't the first time we've heard this, that Jodi would be very, like, demanding almost. She wouldn't listen to people and just try to help them, but also allow them to make their own decisions. She would basically tell people exactly what they need to do. One of the worst examples we've seen of this was with Adam Paul Steed, whose interview was unfortunately removed from YouTube. But in that interview, Adam talks about how he received a letter of his wife, which was demanded by Jodi to do. And in the letter, it basically said that we are not going to have contact with each other, I'm going to remain in the house, but I don't even really want to speak to you, I don't have to tell you where I'm going, all this type of stuff. And Jodi actually demanded a change of that letter, which included a section that said that Adam wouldn't be allowed to go to any other therapist other than Jodi. She literally doesn't care what is best for the people involved, she just wants to make some money, clearly.
The one thing that I mentioned when I did speak to other friends about her and the program, she felt extremely uncaring. It felt like transactional. The group, I got a lot of validation or help within the group. I think it was having that level of support and accountability. You know, if you're going to be talking on the phone and talking about things for, you know, this many hours a week, it's kind of maybe a higher likeliness to work than a 1 hour session a week with someone else. But it just was like a general feeling of uncaring. I went there in a moment of like really deep despair, if you will. And it just kind of was like, well, either sign up and pay the money or see you later.
Bloody hell, man. Like, yeah, I've mentioned it a few times in these videos that it shouldn't really be surprising at this point, but the more and more you hear about it, and we hear it from more and more people who were involved talking about their personal experience, it's genuinely grim. But yeah, the more we hear from more and more people, it does become very clear that this is just a transactional thing for Jodi, and she will try and manipulate people into thinking their lives is in like a lot more danger than it is, it's going a lot worse than it is, there's a lot more problems than there actually are, so that person will carry on speaking to her and she will get more money. And that's how she ruins people's lives, because she makes them think that their lives are already ruined and they need to do these steps to fix them. And as we know by now, these steps to fix their situation never actually fixes anything. It makes it 10 times worse.
You know, when I first saw her name in the news, I wasn't familiar with Ruby at the time, but her name is pretty specific, and I, you know, kind of went, that can't be. And, you know, of course, it was easily identifiable to be her. I'm really shocked on the level of egregiousness where, you know, her counseling was so much honest, humble, responsible, like almost like I said, military style of like feeding that into us as the participants as like you're to be this way, just like really, really, you know, aggressively. So to hear her main motto be like completely contradictory to her life and the things that she's doing was just really astonishing.
Well, that's a thing, like, in her Connexions videos, she would use the words like honest, responsible, humble, all this stuff. Words that are actually good to live by, right? You should be honest, humble, responsible, all this type of stuff. But she would use these keywords and then pair it with advice like, oh, if your child is gay, then they're doing something wrong, and then they should be punished for it, and you've got to change this, and all this. It was actually disgusting. But I guess that's probably a way how she manipulated people for so long, because she would use keywords like honest, responsible, humble, and people would see that and be like, oh yeah, I want to be them things. How can I do that?
One more particular thing that stood out to me that she spoke about in the group, I think at some point maybe her license was taken away. And she spoke about that kind of a lot. And I mentioned that because it was almost kind of weird that she mentioned that she was basically doing this higher duty to the world, this higher service, if you will.
I mean, she is genuinely the most delusional woman I think I've ever seen in my life. So when she had a license taken away, that was due to her actions to Adam Steed, who we've spoke about multiple times in these videos. And look, I can't go through the whole story of Adam because it's very long. I've done a few videos talking about it now. So if you do want to see a recap of that story, I did pretty much a full video going through it if you want to see. If you haven't seen it, quickly, I mean, she was disgusting. She basically tried to ruin this man's life in any way she possibly could by manipulating his wife, trying to spread like false allegations against him, went to his church with these allegations, tried tricking him into breaking his restraining order by giving him hope that his wife wanted to be back with him just so he would break this restraining order that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And it was actually a time where he could potentially face many years in prison due to these false accusations. Luckily that didn't happen, but that was something that Jodi was willing to do. So yeah, she got her license, temporarily took off her after this situation, and the fact that she is so delusional and thinks that, oh, the world's just working against her, all she wants to do is the right thing, makes zero sense.
So it sounds like she thought very highly of herself and her abilities.
That would be a very accurate statement from my perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jesse actually said in their interview that Jodi genuinely believed that she was doing, like, God's work by doing these coaching classes and counseling classes and whatnot. And she was here because certain people had, like, Satan in them, and it was her job to change this and whatnot. And that is why she gave, like, the awful advice that she did and tried to ruin people's lives. Yeah, again, it doesn't make sense, does it? But yeah, let's actually move on to the next interview that I wanted to talk about, again from KUTV. Like I said, I want to give big credit to them. But it's actually an interview with Matthew Franke, which is the nephew of Kevin Franke.
There have been a lot of people who, especially like I've made the mistake of going through like social media comments and stuff like that, and they've been, you know, making suggestions that like my family in particular and like the other people on the Franke side of the family had some idea that any of this was going on, and that's been a little hard to read because, you know, we haven't really seen Ruby for like 10 years.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because the amount of people that Jodi and Ruby have actually affected in this family, even if it isn't directly, and what I mean by that is obviously the way they've affected their children is very direct, but then you've got to think about the other people in the family that are now getting like disgusting messages because people think they could be involved or know what's happened. When in reality it seems like, or at least as he said there, he hasn't even seen Ruby for 10 years. And yeah, I doubt anyone who's watching this video is one of the people who've been sending these horrible messages to other people in the family who weren't involved, but obviously, it goes without saying, don't do that. It's bang out of order. But yeah, like I mentioned, I highly doubt anyone watching this video has done that. I would imagine it would be the people who have just kind of seen like the news coverage for the first time and the headlines and stuff, and then realised, oh, we know someone who's got that same last name, let's send horrible messages. That's what I would assume, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think a lot of that perception has kind of been the difficult part for me. You know, obviously I'm really concerned about Russell and Eve. You know, because I've been thinking back on memories where like we have seen them at Christmas family reunions and stuff. You know, trying to think like, was there anything that I could have seen that could have suggested anything like that was going on? A lot of those misconceptions and stuff have been kind of hard to deal with, just because it's, now because people are recognizing my name now around school and work, and so I'm kind of a little nervous about introducing myself, because like I don't really have any affiliation with them.
Yeah, that must be so hard to have to deal with, because it is kind of a unique last name in terms of it's got like the E at the end. I think obviously you'd see like Frank as a last name, but Frankie's a little bit more rare. And with this story being so big and millions and millions and millions of people know about it, you probably would be a bit on edge. Even if the people you're speaking to don't even know anything to do with the situation, and they wouldn't judge you because they wouldn't know anything about it, you would still probably feel on edge, and I can only imagine how difficult that must be.
For anyone who thinks that what Ruby did was typical, Mormon behavior, it's not. That's something I've seen circulating around on the internet. As someone who was a member, it's not even something that the church would even consider, and I don't know why any church would.
Yeah, definitely not. And that's something that I've mentioned a lot in my videos, that Ruby will use her religion as an excuse for her actions, but there are countless amounts of Mormons who don't act like this and would think what Ruby has done is absolutely disgusting, beyond words. It just so happens that she likes to use her religion to justify it, which, again, is damaging even more people. So like we said, as much as Jodi and Ruby have affected people directly, the amount of people they've affected indirectly as well, people in their family who had nothing to do with it, haven't seen them for so long, knew nothing about it. Now you've got a whole religion receiving backlash because of Jodi and Ruby's actions. So yeah, as much as the direct effects of the kids is obviously the most important part here, the part that I believe should have Jodi and Ruby receiving the toughest sentence that they possibly could, in my opinion. You've also got these indirect effects where they have affected so many people's lives for the worse. You've also got the clients, obviously, as well. Like, it's mental how many people have been affected by Jodi and Ruby, and for some reason they're still delusional and still think they haven't done anything wrong.
I still am kind of hoping that the book gets thrown at both of them, especially Jodi, because hearing like some of the things that she had with some of her previous clients about breaking like doctor-patient confidentiality and stuff like that, it's like she shouldn't have a license anymore. Starting this group with my aunt that is really cultish from the sounds of it, I think she should get put away for a long time. As far as my aunt, I think she definitely needs to do time.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that Ruby's immediate family, also Kevin's side of the family, have all come out and said that Jodi and Ruby both should have been arrested and whatnot, and they still believe they've done nothing wrong. Like, when your whole family believes that you've done something wrong, should it not really, like, ring alarm bells in your head that maybe you have? But also, I can imagine it's interesting to hear for a lot of you lot. Like, we've had these worries about Jodi and Ruby for so long, and now when you hear the immediate family, and then, like, Kevin's side of the family as well, coming out and talking about how this has been a worry, and how Jodi and Ruby should be doing time for this, it really does kind of validate everybody's worries throughout the years. Because I remember, like I mentioned a while ago, that in my like first 8 Passages videos, I would get so many comments on videos from people being like, oh no, this is just strict parenting, that's all it is, they aren't actually doing anything wrong, when in reality they clearly were for a long time. It's still crazy to me that it took so long for something to happen, but I'm just glad action is taking place. Just unfortunately a lot more people had be affected in the time that nothing did happen. It's still crazy to me that it took so long for any action, but I'm just glad there is action at this point, and hopefully there will be justice for the people who have been affected from this. And yeah, it's just a shame that it took so long, because it allowed more and more people to be affected from Jodi and Ruby.
I think Kevin should be arrested too. Me and my dad have been having a hard time believing that he had zero contact with his family, that he had no idea that Ruby would leave them for long stretches of time, because he at least had to have stayed in contact with Sherry, because he was part of overseeing her car and her student stuff at BYU. And so some of that had to have made its way through.
Wow, so this is interesting, because this is Kevin's nephew saying that Kevin should also be arrested, which is not a good look for Kevin, because he's currently trying to get custody for his kids, and his attorney's trying to do this whole like propaganda campaign, it feels like, where he's trying to make Kevin seem like an angel, when that clearly isn't the case. We've been speaking about Kevin for years. But Matthew Franke here and his dad, which would obviously be Kevin's brother, both believe that Kevin could have something to do with it. So I think that should say a lot.
So at the very least, I think he should be brought up on neglect charges, because that's not acceptable.
But there you go. He just said that Kevin should at least have child neglect charges from his opinion. And yeah, like I said, I think that says a lot about Kevin, and we're going to hear some more horrible details about Kevin coming up, to be fair. But first, let's get to the information surrounding Pam Bodger. So it was literally just in my last video when we spoke about Pam Bodger. We first mentioned her a couple of years ago when we first started talking about Connexions, but we didn't really mention her throughout the years because we didn't really know too much. Well, recently Pam Bodger's name was brought up, so I decided to have a look back on the Facebook page to see what I could find throughout the last few years. Turns out she has been heavily involved. She's been running some classes herself through Connexions. She's been doing like these panels at like little halls and stuff for Connexions where people would come and watch. And obviously, as it says on the website, she is the president of Connexions classrooms, apparently. But as I mentioned in that last video, the last thing I could see from Pam Bodger on the Facebook group was from 2022, I believe, in like August time. So I wasn't 100% sure if she was still involved. I didn't know if she was even still friends with Jodi and Ruby, but it turns out she is, up until the day of the arrest, quite frankly. Reports obtained by 2 News show how local law enforcement collaborated with the Department of Child and Family Services to locate 2 of Ruby Franke's children who were in Utah County, while 2 others were found malnourished and physically abused in southern Utah on the same day. According to a Springville police officer on August 30th, officers responded to Franke's Springfield home to try and locate 2 children still unaccounted for. Officers checked the home, but all of the doors and windows were secured, and additionally, all of them were covered with blinds or curtains, preventing officers from being able to observe inside. Officers later obtained a search warrant. After no answer at the home following several minutes of knocking and announcing their presence, officers made entry to Franke's home by breaching the front door. After a search, the home was found to be unoccupied. According to police, officers then reached out to oldest Franke's sister. One of the children left the local place of employment by telling her supervisor that she needed to leave for a family emergency. After reviewing surveillance footage from the local place of employment, it showed that one of the children was picked up by Pam Bodger. So yeah, that is something I mentioned in my last video, that there was some rumours kind of going around that 2 of the children were with Pam Bodger when this was all happening, when Jodi and Ruby were arrested, which actually turns out to be true. So that answers the questions as to Pam Bodger and Jodi and Ruby still friends? Clearly they are. Springville officers were then headed to American Fork to speak with Bodger. They were contacted by Utah County major crimes detectives who were at the home in American Fork, and they told officers that both children were located. After dialogue and questioning, Bodger then explained that around noon that day, she received a call from Ruby Franke, who told her that she had a family emergency and asked if Bodger could pick up blank and blank. According to Bodger, Ruby asked if the 2 children could go to her house with her for a while. Bodger told the officers the request was not odd since she had blank and blank over to her residence before to do housework and other chores for her. Now obviously, just based off this article, we can't tell exactly how much involvement Pam Bodger had, or what she knew of what was happening, but when we bear in mind that she's the president of Connexions classroom, where Jodi and Ruby would openly talk about their disgusting beliefs, like the way they wanted to treat their children and other people. Also, Pam used to do classes herself with Connexions. I can't find any of them classes or any of the videos, so I don't know the type of stuff that she would say in them, but she had to at least be aware of the extreme beliefs and the extreme stuff that Jodi and Ruby have been saying for years now. So does that mean she knew the extent of what was happening at the home? Technically not. That doesn't prove that she knew exactly what was happening at the home and the extent of it, but I mean, she's good friends with Jodi and Ruby. They work together. She's seen what Jodi and Ruby say online. She at least knew that much, and how much she knew, I guess we don't really know just yet. The 2 girls were informed by a DCFS worker that they were to stay with their older sister Sherry or be placed with a foster family. Initially, the 2 girls didn't want to leave Bodger's home, but were eventually placed with her older sister. KUTV News has reached out to Bodger multiple times and stopped by her home in American Fork on Tuesday afternoon seeking comment, but no one answered the door. So yeah, that's kind of the updates we have with Pam Bodger. Obviously, there's not a crazy amount of details there, but we at least know now that Pam is still involved with Jodi and Ruby, or at least was before the day of this arrest. So it really does beg the question, how much did she know? And obviously we don't really know the answers just yet, but maybe we will one day. Now, the last part of these updates that I want to talk about actually involves Kevin Franke, because like I've mentioned a few times, he's been doing this whole, or at least his attorney's been doing this whole media campaign where he's trying to make Kevin seem like an angel, knew nothing about it, is the perfect dad and all this stuff, which quite frankly isn't true, because we've seen what Kevin's been like in the videos for many, many years. But this new article that's came out about Kevin definitely isn't a good look. So the article starts off saying that they went back to Ruby Franke's home the day after the arrest, and then says, the eldest sister, Sherry, had gone to the home to gather clothing and personal items for her two sisters. A DCFS worker was also at the home gathering items for the two other children who were in the state's custody in southern Utah, after they were located the previous day in Ivins at Jodi Hildebrandt's home. The caseworker informed police they believed Kevin Franke might be at home and that he may not be cooperative, which is why they requested police assistance. When police arrived, the caseworker, Sherry, and other family members were already in the home. All of them were further advised that they should not collect any items that do not belong to them or aren't needed for the children, the document read. And then at this point, this is where the story gets a bit mad, because it carries on by saying, 2 News obtained a third police report from Springville Police outlining a phone call from Kevin Franke, Ruby's husband, reporting on a burglary on September 1st. So this is 2 days after the arrest. Kevin allegedly reported that electronic items, specifically his electronic journals, were missing. He told officers he believes his oldest daughter Sherry is responsible due to a statement she made in court day. The officer told Kevin the front door had been broken in after a search warrant was served days prior and not broken by his oldest daughter. Kevin stated that Sherry is not allowed in the home, that he believes she entered unlawfully, and he wants her charged with burglary, which is absolutely insane considering wouldn't you want to try and limit any form of stress for your children who've had to go through this and how big of a situation this is? And the fact that he was willing to try and get her charged with burglary when she was already going through this situation after she spent about a year trying to speak out about it and the police wouldn't do anything at the time, and now it's finally happened. This must be such an overwhelming day, or multiple days quite frankly, and then he was willing to do that. I really don't understand that from, you know, the angel dad. Kevin states that he does not want any of the children mentioned in the home at this time. I then explained that they need to get essential items of theirs that were in the home, which he did not seem to think was relevant. The report mentions that Sherry brought the items back to Springville Police Department and they were given to Kevin a short time later. Among the items were 3 tablets, 3 cell phones, 3 cameras / GoPros, a stack of written journals, and 3 passports for Kevin, Ruby, and another one of their children. Now, it's very unclear why Sherry took these items. She might have just grabbed like a bunch of stuff, like maybe in like a bit of a rush to leave the house. Maybe there's a more specific reason behind it, we don't really know. But either way, if you're Kevin in the scenario, surely you just ask for the items back and you don't try and get your daughter charged for burglary. The complainant was informed that we wound to not be charging his daughter with anything as her intent was not to deprive him of any items. She had previously been allowed in the home and he had not been in the home admittedly for 13 months, the officer wrote in the report. Which again is a bit of a mental point. He hasn't been in this home for about 13 months as he says, and now all of a sudden he's really concerned about these items that are no longer there, so much so that he's willing to get his own daughter charged with burglary, even though you haven't used any of these items for 13 months. Like, what was on these items? To me, it sounds like he's very worried about something, and this is based on zero fact. I'm just speculating here. But some of the stuff that was taken was like cell phone, cameras, written journals. Like, there could be any form of evidence on there, and it does sound like he was panicking a bit, but I mean, like I said, based on zero fact. He, Kevin, advised he was going to sue the police department, the officer wrote. Kevin was displeased with this answer and advised that we would be hearing from his attorney. Now, Kevin's attorney has spoke out about this and basically just tried to make it seem as if none of this really happened. He said, Kevin didn't do either. He and Sherry are working together on bygones and resuming a loving and healthy father-daughter relationship. Kevin is still trying to understand and correct the upside-down world that was dealt to him. Like, I really don't understand this language. He's really trying to make Kevin seem as if he's an angel. He had nothing to do with this, and he's like the victim here, which isn't the case. Sky Lazaro, a criminal defense attorney not involved in this case, told KUTV 2 News, the police reports are revealing. I think it gives us some insight into the family dynamic more than anything, Lazaro said. It really seemed to outline there was probably some disconnect with his family. Lazaro also said the information in the reports tends to maybe lend some credibility that there was probably or potentially some problems there. So yeah, that's the end of the article. Obviously, I haven't read any of the police reports directly here, but KUTV have been covering this like a lot since this arrest happened, and from what I have seen, everything that they reported turned out to be true when we got more information. So I tend to believe this. Obviously, I can't say for 100% fact that this is definitely true because I haven't seen the reports. But yeah, with that being said, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. I think this is probably a bit of a longer video. I'm not sure how long it'll be. I've been recording for quite a while. If you have obviously got to this point, please let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on everything I spoke about in today's video. And yeah, if you're new, subscribe, all that stuff. And until the next one, I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright, goodbye.